I'm sure one of our colleagues was unable to join us from the US. I'm sure there was something that happened so much that she could not join the team. And part of the team are going to join us from Addis via the White Man's Voodoo. That I'm sure they've been trying to connect that voodoo for us to be able to be connected, and I'm told it's now up. So much that at least we can continue the conversation, and the conversation is going to be centered on the art practices, opportunities and challenges both in Africa and in the diaspora, because Tariq is working and practicing from New York. Tariku. Forgive my pronunciation. Sometimes I think it's Zulu or it's Shona or it's Swahili, but because they are from the east, the part of East Africa, which is a very important continent, and Ethiopia in particular. But I would also want to acknowledge that Mesfin is here as one of the co-founders of the Addis Fine Arts, and part of the team and part of the teams that are here and those in Addis, they've also been inspired by the Ale School of Art and Design that was founded in the 1950s by none other than Gabriel Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia, who was the founding father of Ethiopia. So possibly I would like to start with Mesfin to give us a context, especially from the Ale School of Art and Design, Fine Art and Design, because that's not the only art school that has been founded within the continent. You're also thinking about other schools that were founded right from the South Africa with Rocker Street and the Poly Street, the workshop school that was founded by our founding director, Frank McEwen, the Tengenenge Art Center. Then you've got the Ulibaya in Nigeria and other art centers dotted around the continent. So possibly, before you tell us more about the Addis fine art, take us back into the 50s, because there's need for us to look back.
I did not know that I was that old, but but thank you for having us here, Neri and his team. You've been very gracious, and I'm very happy to be here, and along with such esteemed people. I grew up in Ethiopia and went to the States as a young man, but really my connection with the school was not that much, to be frank. But the school, I think it was established the year I was born. I think now you all know that I was born in 1956. So it's one of those things that Emperor Haile Selassie at the time felt was important, to have an art school, and a gentleman by the name of Ala Fagel Salam was who the school is now named after. He initiated this idea for this school to be established in Ethiopia. So it has a very rich history. It's one of the first art schools probably on the continent. It has produced some amazing talents. Among them, Skinder Bogosian, Gabra Christos Desta, and Afor Tekle. These are the names that are kind of recognized outside of Ethiopia. Until recently, they were, really the fathers of modern Ethiopian contemporary art. So the school is still there. It's still producing some amazing talents. Yes, it's challenged. There are many challenges. But when you look at Ethiopia and the number of people that live on in this country, it's over 110 million. So to have a school that's really the most important art school in Ethiopia for a population of that size, it's not enough, but at the same time, what the school has done and what the school has trained, some of the panelists that you're going to be hearing from are a product of that school, including like Tadesse Mesfin, who's a 70 years old, teacher who taught at the school for 34 years. Hopefully he will be on, and it has contributed immensely. I think I should go back to you before I continue just talking about the school.
Well, I mean, it is important for us to be able to look back, because for us to be able to look into the future, that past can also inform the future. And before I go back, I go to Tariku, I would like you to take us through the journey of how the art is fine art was formulated. Why art is fine art?
Well, I have a very small version of the story because, it's a long journey. I got into this about 25 years ago. I was just going back and just buying art from Ethiopian artists, which really, grabbed me and engaged me. And I was so happy to have discovered something about Ethiopian artists that I didn't know about. So the first time I left Ethiopia was 1974. And I didn't go back to 1992 because we had a military regime that made it difficult to go back. So move fast forward, I kept buying and coming back to Ethiopia. And then I decided to open a gallery in Los Angeles. So did that for a few years, and then I need to move fast forward. I was, kind of like minding my business and enjoying my life in Los Angeles. And a young lady by the name of Raphael Chikukwa showed up, knocked on my door, and she's like, okay, we need to work together, because she was, she's from London, an Ethiopian young lady who was very excited about, what Ethiopian artists were doing. And she was, she did not find Ethiopian artists participating internationally, just going to fairs, they were absent. You find the Nigerians, the Ghanaians, the South Africans and whatnot, but not a lot of Ethiopian artists were represented in these major international fairs. So, she proposed that we work together, and 2015 we formed this fine art gallery, and immediately a few months later we also established a gallery in London, and it's been honestly for 6.5 years. It's been the best years of our life, because we were able to be the first one, really, in the history of Ethiopian art scene, where a gallery based in Ethiopia was able to take Ethiopian artists, their works, and create this bridge, to link them, with the big international art community, art market, art discourse. There are many great galleries in Ethiopia, but they were always challenged as far as how to share it, with the rest of the world. And for us to have done that, we feel very lucky. And here we are in Venice after 6.5 years.
Thank you. Tariku, born in Addis, and then I'm sure as a kid, when we were talking earlier on, you moved to LA, and then now you're in New York. And can you just take us through your practice? Because here we're also talking about the issues of art practice, opportunities and challenges. When one thinks about those artists working and practicing in the diaspora, when you're back in the continent, you always think those artists are closer to the source.
Right.
So,
so I grew up in Los Angeles, and I remember being interested in art, painting, drawing. I remember watching my brother, doodle. His ballpoint pen drawings were just fire, and I used to bribe him as a kid to just draw me some stuff. He would, take advantage of that, and he'd be like, "Go get me this from the parents," And so I would just be like, "Yo, do it." And then I think a great moment for me was when he graduated the 12th grade, and I was like in the 7th grade, and he's all like, "Yo, here are all my drawings. I'm moving off to college now." And like for him, he had to follow the traditional immigrant route of like you have to study to become something else. So He studied business and engineering, left art behind, but he was like phenomenal. I remember just, like wanting, envying like his like natural talent and drawing, his ability. Even in college when he took classes, he was able to draw realistically, like, my pops, my mom's, himself, his girlfriend at the time, my sister. And I thought that was like really cool. And so I got into the arts by ways of just appreciating it from afar. And by practice, I was able to, to do what he was doing, but it took me like many years. That's the path that got me to like where we are today, where I was pursuing it through just understanding a new culture, a culture that is outside of home. Home for me is my family. And then outside is literally like when I leave the house to go to school, to interact with the outside world. So then art making became something very different for me. And that was like my path, my experience was making art that engaged the system that I had lived in, which by my definition, the system is outside of home. This foreign thing that I would encounter as soon as I left home, as soon as I left my family, my parents, to go to school, to eventually to go to work, to do everything else. And so engaging that system meant that I have to understand where I come from, how I navigate, and also understanding my identity and how my identity played in that particular system I engaged in outside of home. And so so it began there. I eventually going to college for art, going through art history. A lot of it was, as we all know, all those of you that have taken art history classes, European art history, and never seeing something that resembled me or those I immediately identified with. And so, so for a long time, that was the case, even in every class I had taken. And so then making art became more of engaging something that I was very interested in, but did not look like me. And even my move towards abstraction was something that dealt with like approaching the system in a way that I didn't have to give it a recognizable image. More like signs and signifiers, right? Where there's a sign and a symbol, a sign that indirectly pointed to something else that could possibly mean something to one person and another to another. And so I was very much interested in these ideas. And so then when I started making these paintings, I was about engaging a history of painting, a history of Western abstraction, a history of vast history that sort of just, I wanted to put my own marks into it that threw it back to something that I was able to, that gave me the opportunity to interject or to introduce a different conversation. And that for me was really, engaging it through the language of abstraction, painterly marks, mark making, painterly gestures, all that. So when you see that vast blue in the background and these black horizontal geometric forms, I was like, that was my first place of engagement. Almost like this FBI redactive forms that said something else, on top of that, not necessarily taking anything away, but just adding to it. Because in the history of painting, we talk about painting in ways that is it's self-referential. It refers to itself like painting for painting's sake or art for art's sake. Then for me it became, and that's like you could get away with a lot doing that. So then for me it became about what if I was to redirect those signs and signifiers to something else? And so then I started using titles to redirect that into, as a form of mark making, an invisible mark making, but like naming something, to use titles that refer to the African diaspora through music titles that refer to, hip hop, R&B, jazz, blues, reggae, Afrobeats, and generally these songs, this music, even though it's like groovy and popular and culturally, in itself, a cultural production form, right? Like a form that presented a culture that I identified with very heavily. Also was a form of resistance, but a form of showing passion, love, and everything else that came with it. And so then, and marking the surface, but also in marking it with the title, then it automatically, my work referred back to a culture that I was more like raised in. Culture, so with some of my friends, I talk about Afrobeats also, right? Afrobeats is, it's had its own lanes, but they all like interweave like with each other. They all have this form of resistance. The Afrobeats, really quotes hip hop, and hip hop goes into Afrobeats. But then again, blues and jazz being something from a different generation, but hip hop being the reincarnation of these blues and jazz. And so I found those like music forms as like a tool to refer back to something that I grew up in. I always give examples about how some lyrics have like changed my life and the way I think about them and the way I think about myself. Like from.
Can you give us names of some of the hip hop artists?
Absolutely. So like growing up, listening to Talib Kweli, to even Jay-Z, Nas, Kendrick Lamar, and in recent years, the last 10 or so years, their lyrics go everywhere, all over the place. But there was moments, like for instance, when the same brother that I told you guys that made these drawings, we used to roll in his car, in his like really beat up car back when I was a kid, in like 1996, and he was in high school, and we used to play Nas's song "If I Rule the World," and the song goes something like, "If I rule the world, I'd free all my sons." And then he starts off with, "Imagine smoking weed on the streets without cops harassing," and then he continues with that like these ideas like, "I'd free everyone in Attica, take them to Africa," and like Marcus Garvey, Garveyism, like something like where he was referring to how culture is not having us, or the system is not having us like free. Something about like lack of freedom, and the 90s, obviously, with the ideas of like many Black folks in the U.S. being incarcerated and whatnot, or not being left alone in the neighborhoods that we had lived in. And so when I use that as a title, or Kendrick Lamar's King Kunta, a reference to Kunta Kinte, character from the 1976 literary novel by Alex Haley, which refers to real life. And so those moments where they sort of just cross like art making and visual culture, for me, I literally bring those into my work. When I'm thinking about titling my works, I'm thinking about real life lived experiences that could be, not just the background, but like almost like a juxtaposition of like my works. And so with the images that you see, so with these images actually, and then in 2020, I started the bars started turning into color. So black and blue has been my thing for a very long time. These are my works, yeah. Okay. And so black and blue for a very long time was the way that I had engaged my practice, first through through the blues music, which I was listening to a lot of just actually one particular song by Louis Armstrong, Black and Blue, where he says, "What did I do to be so black? My only sin is in my skin." And then from there, I went into thinking about other like jazz music and blues music, considering my music background also, just like I have played the drums for so long, and so then from there I went into thinking about blue because of the aesthetics. I had just like loved blue for a long time, but black and blue, the juxtaposition for me was very very strong. It was like a visceral thing. And then thinking about it more over the years, so I had started this body of work in 2016. So over the years, where black and blue became also a very interesting, had a very interesting dialectical relationship from like, the day blue skies and the night blue, the night dark blue, sky. Then also thinking about like so many things like signs and signifiers. Some people had mentioned, oh, like the uniform against the black skin, like the uniform that enforced a system against this dialectical relationship again, this clash, right? And so I was very much interested in that. So for a long time I worked in those, and in 2020 I went into these gradation of colors, skin tone, and other references, but immediately that's what sunk in with a lot of folks. And it always starts with blue. If there's no blue on that surface, and there's no black on that surface, then it's not part of the work for me. So if you don't see the blue bar, then you'll see the blue somewhere in the background in the most subtle way or whatnot. And so that's where it started, but it's also like thinking like the spectrum of blackness, right? Encompassing blackness, not only globally, but I'm sorry?
Okay, but are there opportunities for people of color in the US in terms of artists, opportunities to showcase their work in bigger spaces?
What do you mean opportunities?
Opportunities, I mean, like today we are all here in Venice, and we are not the first one to come to Venice. There are many people who have attempted to come to Venice. But when I'm watching from a distance in Africa, you are looking at it, like I said earlier on, that we always think that those who are working and practicing in the diaspora, they're closer to the source. They can easily get a show at MoMA, they can easily get a show at Smithsonian.
Those that are in the US?
Yes.
I wouldn't say easily. It hasn't been a very it hasn't been a very easy trip or journey for a lot of us, Black artists or Black identifying artists throughout the decades to show in these places. We've been tokenized for a very long time, and when we make it in recent years, a lot of folks, until recently, a lot of folks that have made works, they had been, sidelined until their 70s and 80s, or until they're like just passed away, like Jack Witt and Alma Thomas. We ain't heard her until she, and so then it's not. I wouldn't use the word easily to have gotten into those spaces, but now recently, in the last few years, we see younger artists showing at these platforms like the Whitney Biennial, and also having amazing platforms. I'm so glad to see our colleagues right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
They made it.
Hello. My name is Raphael Chikukwa, mzee mtoto wa Zimbabwe. Unaongea Kiswahili? Okay, welcome. I would like you to introduce yourself. We cannot hear you properly, so maybe Neri can play with the voodoo and see how the voodoo can voodooize for us to be able to hear you properly. Well, earlier on we were talking about issues of the NFTs.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me? So Tadesse can start. Okay. My name is Tadesse Mesfin. I completed my education, the first diploma program at Addis Ababa University, at a School of Fine Arts, and then I got a scholarship to Russia, Soviet Union, and I got my graduation degree with painting. And then I just came back to Ethiopia, and I've been teaching for the last 34 years at the Addis Ababa University, School of Fine Arts and Design. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can continue.
And since that, and I've been teaching, as I told you, there for so many years, and now I'm a freelance artist. I already stopped teaching, and I'm working in my studio with Fine Arts, Addis Fine Arts Gallery, affiliated with them, and I'm enjoying my time now because I'm a freelance artist.
Tadesse, can you talk to us about your time in the Soviet Union and how that influenced you?
As you already mentioned there, when I joined art school, we were very small at that time. Art school, the criteria to be a student at this fine art school was to complete 8th grade, and I completed 9th grade, and I joined the art school at the age of 50. And I stayed there for 5 years and graduated with distinction with diploma at the fine art school. And then after that, I worked for 5 years at the National Theatre in Addis Ababa. And after that, I went to Russia, to Raphael Academy. Before I went there, I was very much interested in depicting the lives of the poor people because I was myself very poor and I grew up in the welfare station. So I had a lot of sympathy for people around me who were destitute and people with poor life, and most of the time I worked on these people with impressionistic style. My paintings were very much like emotional, with palette knife, with brush strokes. And then after I moved to the Soviet Union, I started studying academical paintings. Of course, academical paintings with a little bit different that we have been studying at the art school. There we studied tonal arrangements, epic compositions, multi-figure compositions, and of course the drawing was very good at that time, and I did a lot of works, and I had very monumental big painting. And after graduating with honor at the Raphael Academy, I came back to Ethiopia. Something I would like to tell you is there is a lot of similarity between Ethiopian traditional art and Russian art, because Ethiopia is one of the oldest countries who accepted Christianity, and our Coptic Church, Orthodox Church, have a long tradition of painting. In Ethiopia, what we know when you talk about African art, we know the art of Sub-Saharan Africa or the West African sculpture and masking. But when you come to Ethiopia, it's a different orientation. Here in Ethiopia, there is a strong tradition of painting because there are so many thousands of churches, and all churches have got wall paintings, illuminated manuscripts. They have icons and magic scrolls, and all these are paintings. That's why when you talk about Skindel Bogosian, Gabriel Christos Desta, Aleph Salam, and Afolk Tekle, we are always talking about we're mostly painters, That tradition has already been cultivated for many years, for thousands of years, you can say. The tradition. So then I think we have a strong art school, really, of course, sculpture is not as much as strong as painting because there is no tradition, it's very tradition. But concerning the painting, I think that's one of the best schools in Africa. So we can see the works of Tesfaye, all other students, they have got a very good painting, a very good draftsmanship. So I think that tradition is still strong here in Ethiopia. That has been not discovered yet. So I hope that there should be more study, more research on why Ethiopian art is so a little bit different than the rest of African
what's your take? Those who say that it was the Westerners who taught the African person how to paint and sculpt.
Mostly, when we talk about African art, it is so diversified because Africa is so huge. It's got a lot of tradition, and Africa is a place where I think it's one of the oldest cave painting was founded. So we have really a big tradition. I think this we have to study. I myself personally have been making a lot of research and study on African because when you study African art, you come to Picasso, and then Picasso, why he got that Cubism, and then when you come to Ethiopian traditional art, all combined together, I am trying to reflect all these eclectic works of influences from African and Ethiopian traditional art. I believe that in identity, of course, identity is very important for me because in identity, you truly find yourself and you can contribute a lot. So to find, I think that it's a big journey and a big research, and then that's what I'm doing now at this time. And then still, it is limitless. So you go on, you don't know where you come. So you invite with one form of working, and then you go to the next one. So my position is that an Africa can give us a lot, and the only thing is that we have to coordinate the modern knowledge with our African traditional art.
Where do we go? Because Tariku here was talking about, well, he studied in the US, but even those who are studying in down to Makerere, to Michaelis in Cape Town, and in other universities, they study more about the Western modernist. Where do we go from here? Is there any need for us to look back into Ethiopia as the cradle of mankind, with all those churches with old tradition of painting and the rock paintings that are dotted around the sub-Saharan Africa, and including the mosque of, the Giza and the Great Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe? Where do we go if we want to?
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to say that even though my work personally, can you guys hear me? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to say, even though my work engages Western abstraction, I clearly don't believe that abstraction was started in the West. I think. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay. I think abstraction is native to Africa. Abstraction is native to a lot of indigenous folks in the U.S. and in Canada and Australia, the Aborigines, and many more. But abstraction is not. Abstraction has been marked in a way through the mid-20th century art history that it is somehow European. When I think I had mentioned this to you earlier, when Jackson Pollock was making those drip paintings, he was referring to the Native Americans that were making those works. Right. And when Barnett Newman was writing about those, he was really using those native languages to refer to abstraction and constructing the idea of Western abstraction. And so the basis of abstraction does not originate in new Western culture. It does exist. It has existed for thousands of years. So, but me engaging Western abstraction doesn't necessarily give credit to it as something that originated from there. Even though my work engages it, my work is essentially engaging a systemic structure using that tool, that conversation. So I think, as my colleague Tadesse was speaking about his background in the Soviet Union, I don't think, we've never had a conversation before, but I don't think he is referring to it as something where it originated there. I can't speak for him, but maybe he could agree or disagree with me. But I think the conversation started there. An opportunity was given because for a long time, I think art making was taken away from Ethiopia because of the war that had been there for a long time, from my understanding. And at that time, there was a discontinuation of these art practices in Ethiopia that really left Ethiopians sort of just empty-handed for a very long time, for at least 20 years or more, where there was no art making, there was no musical production at a international level. And so these are the things that I know my fellow Ethiopian artists that have come up from the land that are battling these uphill battles. And so when he goes to Soviet Union, it's for a better education that was not afforded in our home country, that because of the war, because of the conflicts. And so, but when we engage these things, we're bringing it back to us, and he did refer to identity. We're bringing it back to us in a way that includes us in the picture, us in the conversation, in the medium. But there's an us collectively, even outside of Ethiopia, generally, and to all our brothers and sisters in Africa, that is happening right now. There's an us going on there where everyone is making works based on those challenges that are very unique to each part of Africa. And so when we make these works, we're very aware of where we are, where we come from, and where this history lies. And so that's how I approach it, at least. And so, again, Tadesse, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's how I engage your work too, you know, in that history.
Okay. Mesfin, I've got one question, because before this session, I'm sure there were other sessions where there was a big discussion about the NFTs and the preparedness of the artists' fine art. Are you prepared to
well, frankly, it's a new thing. It's very challenging. We see opportunities. So as a gallery, the responsible thing for us to do is really learn about it at first, because you have to understand, we not only just represent the artists, but we also have relationship with our collectors. So whatever we offer has to be something that we feel very comfortable doing. So with NFTs, we're in a new world. It's the digital world. So, we as a gallery have the responsibility to really prepare ourselves, learn about it, and take it as an opportunity and utilize, this new platform that's actually, coming fast and furious. I can give you a simple example. We have young artists today sitting in Africa, like in Addis, who have decided to put their work on these platforms and have made insane amount of money overnight. So, it's great. It allows, another opportunity for artists, who are not actually working with galleries. Like some artists are utilizing Facebook and Instagram, to sell their works. So all this is great, but it's not easy for galleries, just to come to the table and just jump in, because we have to be mindful of, markets who have in the past have done a lot of damages. So yes, it's here. Yes, we will find our way and be part of it. But are we using it at this particular moment? No, we're learning. That's what we're doing right now.
Earlier on, we discussed about the exhibition of Ethiopian artists in Sweden. Why Sweden? Why not any other place in Africa? Because there are all these many other shows which are taking place. Well, you are a commercial gallery, but why not Johannesburg? Why not Lagos?
Well, I mean, we've done, fairs in Lagos. We've been to Cape Town. We've been to, Joburg. I mean, that's a fair question. The way this particular gallery in Stockholm approached us, they're called CFL. It's a significantly large gallery, and they wanted to engage their audience in Sweden in a way that look, there's these amazing artists out of the Horn of Africa that our audience here in Sweden is not familiar with. And on top of that, there's a very large Ethiopian community in Stockholm. So when they came to us and said, look, why don't we collaborate on this big exhibition? And we obviously had to work out a lot of things, including the financing and whatnot. But it was an opportunity for us to show Ethiopian artists to an audience that knew very little about. So we felt it was our responsibility to say, okay, we'll take it to Sweden and see what happens. Now, should an exhibition like that have returned to Ethiopia? Yes, you're absolutely right. But unfortunately, the mechanics of bringing back exhibitions back into the continent, it's just unthinkable. In our case, in Ethiopia, I'll be honest with you, how do we bring art into Ethiopia, show it, and send it back? These are all new things that.
But those are the challenges which we need to be able to, to discuss, to talk about, because I think what has been happening in the continent, it's not easy to move an exhibition from, let's say, from Mozambique from Beira from Maputo to Addis, or from Addis to, but how do we navigate this? Are we going to remain like that instead of actually moving these shows in order for us to be able to? We did a show in Kampala. It started in Harare to Kampala to Bremen. But I mean, we had to find ways, and I'm sure it was Azu in the earlier conversations talking about how do we move works from point A to point B.
Let me be very blunt here.
Yeah.
Take Ethiopia. If we want to bring artists and their works into Addis, we can bring it. Maybe we might even be able to sell some of the works. But one simple example is, if we sell works, there's almost no way we can pay them with foreign currency. That's just the hard truth. So that's an impediment. That's one big issue. But more importantly, it comes into Ethiopia, but taking it out as a collection, then it becomes another bureaucratic nightmare, which at this moment there's no way I can solve, to be honest with you. And I will not dare bring our work into the country and then find myself stuck with works that I can't even ship out. So this is not something.
So does it mean that you can't even show non-Ethiopian artists? Maybe you can show them outside.
I mean, if there's no transactions involved, if these are just exhibitions, for the whole purpose of just showing works, so that we can inform our audience in Addis that, hey, these are our fellow African artists, we like to show their works. That can be done. But when you venture into the commercial side of it, then it's very problematic. And this is faced by many African countries. This is not unique to Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And being, trying to convince, governments, even our own government is extremely, extremely difficult. This is not an issue that is a priority for them. You build schools, they get it. You build roads, they get it. You build dams. When it comes to the arts, it's
and also the market is a slippery place.
Yeah.
But how do we grow this art ecosystem in the continent?
Well, we have to fight. I mean, that's, we have, as a gallery, we're always engaging government officials. We are constantly challenging them. Again, it's a matter of time. I might not be alive to see, it's a solution for this, but it will happen. I don't know when it's going to happen.
I'm interested in hearing Tesfaye's experience between Germany and Ethiopia. That's
exactly.
That's interesting.
Maybe we can now, the voodoo can move us back to Addis.
Because Tesfaye had a solo show. The first time I saw his works in real life was in Addis Fine Arts, Ethiopia, 2019 or 2012? 2019, yes.
2018, correct.
His solo show, yeah. So then December 2019, when I came to visit, I saw Tesfaye's works, No Country for something.
Young men.
Yes, for young men. And so it's interesting to see him exist in both planes. Europe
because
and
he
Ethiopia.
had a successful career in Germany.
Yeah.
But he went to school initially in Ethiopia, at the art school. Then he went back to Germany, went to school and had a career. And now actually he decided to...
It's your turn, Tesfaye.
Actually, we feel today, and the reason for that is we want to establish a second studio in Susan. My wife can work in Germany and also in Addis Ababa. But before going to the team, I just want to add that because I have something in mind. Because Tariku and also you, Raphael, mentioned about Western art, and I have really some problem because of that word and its inaccuracy. Because when people ask me, people most of the time ask me, you are doing like a Western art, not African art, and so on. But what do you call? Which kind of art do you call Western art? When you think about art history. Even realism is invented in Egypt about 3,000 years ago and passed to the Greeks, and the Greeks added some modifications and passed it to the Romans, and the Romans did their copies and also did their own editions. But when you just look at it until Renaissance, and even after that, couple of 100 years, the tradition actually never changed so much. And it's still basically based on naturalistic style. And until a couple of 100 years, when artists somehow bored with that kind of painting and start to look outside of Europe to Africa, for example. Picasso saw the masks from Africa. Paul Klee flew to Egypt and did those watercolors and bring those inspiration. And Henry Matisse, Monet, they look to Asian prints and so on. So when you look at it, the whole result, every continent of the globes had really tremendous contribution, what you could to this this Western art. So I think we should try to probably be more precise on that, and that's all. Now, when I come to moving to Germany and moving to Ethiopia and Germany, is because I moved to Germany. I want to study further. I studied at the School of Fine Art. Tadesse gave me a couple of courses. I learned painting from Mesfin, Shiferaw, and very, very intelligent painters in the country. Unfortunately, they are not very, how do I say, introduced to the rest of the world, and that's really a bad part, I think. But still, they are really very, very amazing artists and build lots of generations and produce very, very good artists in the country and now to the world. And when I think about, studying in art school, I was very much interested in studying the human being, and that was the whole motivation for me. And after I did that, I thought, okay, now I can do it about, the anatomy, or how to think about, through colors and do a good composition in song. So I wanted to learn something more. So I felt like, there is something more. And then at that time, the art school like this wasn't offering, anything more than that. So I thought like, moving to Germany is a good option. So I did that. When I come to Germany, one of the best things that I got is, the space, the time, and the freedom to experiment. So that through that experimentation and my experience of this naturalism style, mix it and gave me like something, very much powerful for me. So now like I'm coming back to artists and see like, how the current situation, it could be political or social, influenced by art, and also, how I can influence, the art scene here in Addis. And hopefully through this experiment, comes very, something very, very desirable.
Okay, thank you. Possibly, maybe I can now open to the audience.
Hi, I'm Raphael Chikukwa. I'm also co-founder of Mesfin. I just have a question that my colleague here asked. She said very rightfully, are there no female artists in Ethiopia?
Well,
You can answer that question.
In our earlier discussions, I talk about this and say we are too many boys here.
Well, actually, there was another person who was supposed to be part of this panel. Her name is Mary Koko, an amazing young Ethiopian artist who's actually in the
main show.
We're showing her work in the Biennale, the main room. And to answer the question, there are many female Ethiopian artists who actually work with us. I know when we first opened, we showed only 7, young men initially, but since then, probably 60% of our artists that are working with us are female artists who have done really remarkably well, and we are very proud of them. So yes, we have a lot of female Ethiopian artists.
Also looking forward to having a conversation with Mary Koko, actually.
Professor.
Have the opportunity to have together different generation of artists, and so many sitting in the commercial side of it. So again, I have a naive question. Is there such a thing that could be called Ethiopian art?
Tadesse can answer this better than me. Ethiopian art obviously has been influenced by, as Tadesse was saying, by these paintings that you find all over Ethiopia when you go to these old churches. So that has really inspired a lot of young Ethiopian artists to reflect on it. And for that reason, if you go back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, the inspiration came out of the church. But today, the world is small. It's all connected. Artists all over the world are getting information, accessing information very easily. So even artists sitting in Addis can now look at works by other great artists all over the world that, provide them inspiration. So if you look at some of the artists that are working with us, can you, immediately recognize images, icons that are very Ethiocentric? No. I mean, when you look at Tariku's work, which I find quite compelling, he has an American experience growing up in America, influenced by, the Black culture. So, that is, primarily what Tariku is looking at. But that doesn't mean Tariku, having been born in Ethiopia and having Ethiopian families, it doesn't mean they didn't have influences on him as far as which way he was going with his work. But
can you, like what the question from the professor, can you say Ethiopian art?
Messiah, I love that you started with the churches, because my experience as a kid with Ethiopian art was these angels with afros, and I really appreciated that as a kid, because that was like something I identified with. I saw that in many is it made on leather or is it made on a lot of merchants and whatnot, and there were these angels with little wings but like big faces, and they were recognizably black with like afros, and that is the traditional symbol of like art making, or like the equivalence of like Sistine Chapel like imageries. And that was everywhere, a lot of places, and you cannot escape it. If you had lived in Ethiopia for a few months, you would have encountered them, especially like back in the days.
Yeah.
And so then when I see other artists make work, like Helena Mataferia, she's based in New York. She started placing these symbols that we understood as Ethiopian culture into her work. And then, but when you see then like an entire like new movement, like the school, the Ale school, right? Then you see these different painterly marks, but in reference to that understanding, from my understanding.
No, you're
outside.
Absolutely.
So there's a thing that it stems from. So
let's move to Tadesse.
Yes.
Did you get the question?
Yeah, I got the question. Yes.
Yes. Can you
elaborate? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, as you said, there is of course an Ethiopian traditional art, what you call it. If you have observed icon paintings from Russia, from Greek, from Jordan, or from Egypt, and if you compare it with an Ethiopian icon, since in this Byzantine style, icon painting and wall painting and manuscripts grew up in Africa, it has its own characteristics. Through time, it became more primitive in a sense, it became more simplified, and Ethiopian art is very unique from the other iconographic paintings. It is very symbolic, it is stylized, it is decorative, it is poetical, frontal and simplified. There is no depth in Ethiopian art, as you know that in other paintings. But in Ethiopian art, it is frontal, and suspended forms are on the canvas. So there is an Ethiopian traditional art. The guy mentioned it. They are the angels, the faces are mostly rounded. They are looking to one direction. The head is so big, and the torso, as in African art, is shorter, about 5 times the measurement of the head. When you look at these Ethiopian wall paintings, they are amazing, because when you look at the horses, they are so simplified, so stylized. The figures, the warriors, the angels, the people always are depicted, become more exaggerated, more simplified, and through time have become Ethiopian traditional art. We have also another art, what we call it, influenced a lot of arts, like including Iskender Bogosian, is what we call a magic scroll. This magic scroll is a combination of painting and calligraphy. And Ethiopian, what is unique also about Ethiopia is got its own calligraphy. That calligraphy became part of our traditional painting. If you have seen, you know that one of the best artists, Ethiopian artist who is living in America, was an Ekosraf. He is doing all his works on calligraphy. This calligraphy is unique, and combined with a traditional painting has formed a unique Ethiopian. But it's not discovered yet. It's not all introduced outside. It's not already being means a lot of people, scholars who make a research and who find out what exactly make an Ethiopian icons different from the others. So of course now the modern painting is not a religious painting anymore. It's more secular. But we can take a lot of things from myself. I've taken a lot of things from the traditional artists. My paintings have become more simplified, more frontal. There is no depth in the painting, even though they are depicting realistic faces. They are more, what I can tell you, they are not storytelling, but by the figures with themselves are speaking in sheer plastic way. I mean, this is what I got from African art. So Ethiopian traditional art is unique. I think you have to be introduced to that. You have to come and see Ethiopian paintings in museums and churches. I think then you can get the essence of what it looks like.
And I think one should also not forget, before Christianity came in the 4th century to Ethiopia, and also after that, there is the Aksumite dynasty. It's very strong, and also they have their own art, it's very strong. For example, if you look at this stone obelisks, you see the perfection, especially in terms of architecture and so on. But when Christianity came, it spread very quickly and became very dominant. So pre-Christianity art actually kind of, need to be avoided, or like, it's not anymore like unspoken. So what we call now like this traditional Ethiopian art was, led by the church, and the church was like putting strong arm, to keep the art and also influence, the culture. What is the region?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I'm Aza, co-founder of the African Art in Venice Forum. This year's theme is very much in cooperation, and African cooperation. And as well, what I've been hearing this panel is very interesting in terms of the artists have had great influence, the States and Black American culture, Russian and Germany and such. And I think that was during the time of us Africans being either colonized or being going abroad, especially 70s, 80s, and 90s. But now we're talking about 2020. We're going a bit inward after the pandemic. We're going into the local and the regional. We're going into the idea continuing this connection within the African continent, but also diaspora. My question is the following. In your practice, right, and in your intentions, how are you connecting to that, right? But also which country? I'm really interested in seeing like what is your influences within the African continent and the diaspora. Thank you.
For me, for example, I don't actually try to make my works more Ethiopian than they are, because it's important for me, like, not to come up with a kind of synthetic kind of solution to make my works even more Ethiopian. For example, I always say that when I speak, I'm speaking English, but you can hear my accent, the Ethiopian accent, in the language. So being an Ethiopian and at the same time the painter, give it like a great mix, but forgetting the world and outside of Ethiopia wouldn't do me also a good thing. So I'm an Ethiopian, I will stay like that and do the art. So the art will become like a kind of mix. And that's for me something meaningful.
It is exactly because this world is completely changing now. I mean, it's more eclectic, more diversified, at the same time more united. We are doing oil painting. Oil painting is not exactly our traditional material. We are doing oil painting. We are doing human figure, of course, in a sense that the Europeans are taking something from us and we are taking also something from them. Because, it's a matter of give and take. Especially nowadays, in this pluralistic age, you cannot say that one should paint like that, one should paint like this. Because it's so more diversified, becoming more personalized. But of course, we are trying to diffuse and incorporate Ethiopian traditional art with modern Western art. Because, as I told you, the material itself is Western. The Westerns are taking from us and we are taking from them. But what comes out is, I think, it is more international, but at the same time, there is national form, but the content, of course, is international. So I don't think that we should be limited. But each individual artist should decide which way he has to go. In my part, I am studying African art, I study Ethiopian traditional art, and I am incorporating what I have got with my contemporary painting in such way that with my knowledge of what I gained in schools and academies. That's what I play.
Hi, thanks for the really amazing, insightful talk. Tariku, this is a question for you. I wanted to see how you incorporate themes relating to Ethiopian culture into your work, especially in your new upcoming series, Metasamai. We've discussed a bit about some of the research you were doing. Can you just talk more about how you incorporate, whether it's kind of folkloric tales, cultural traditions into some of your newer works?
So, with my practice, I think a lot of people know my current works, which are these geometric abstraction, these parallel forms. That body of work is titled One of These Black Boys. But in the past 4 years, I've been researching, just building up, a new body of work, like for a while now, and it's called Metasamai, which means night skies in Amharic. And the work deals with mythology and the night sky and how we've casted the things that we find valuable to us in the night sky, in the stars and the constellations. And so with that body of work, I started thinking about, the idea of Pan-Africanism against the background of, like just having existed for many hundreds of years under the stars and constellations of the Greeks, the Romans, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, and whatnot. So then when we think about, when I'm thinking about that work, I'm thinking about mythology and how mythology influences the way we think about our existence. So mythology could be, even according to Roland Barthes, something that is that defines itself, that sort of builds itself every day in our everyday practices, everything we do. So if we believe that everyone in a city, a particular city, drinks Coke, then they always drink Coke. That's just whatever stereotype it is or whatever reality it is, then it becomes something that's part fictional and part reality. So for me, engaging that and sort of inserting, instead of European culture, inserting African cultures and its diasporas, from folks in the U.S., the Caribbean, even the natives of Australia today, Adinkra symbols, ancient African symbols like the Dogon culture that has existed and studied the night skies for over 5,000 years and thought about, the things that are significant to them and cast it upon the night sky was very interesting to me. So I started painting these constellations, which I'm going to present for the first time at Macmillan coming up this June in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm very excited about presenting this idea, this painting installation with sculptural objects and sound emanating from those sculptural objects. Apologies, I don't have any image reference for y'all, but and thinking about culture outside of the U.S., outside of European culture, I'm thinking about how this 100% goes right back into thinking about cultural production or ideas that have been that we can cast upon the night sky and sort of just almost like repainting the night sky metaphorically, right? With cultures that I identify with, that a lot of us could identify with, and that's the whole idea. So then I can, to answer your question, halfway. That's like my relationship to the continent, and not just Ethiopia, but the whole continent and its diasporas.
Okay, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank the team in Addis that have joined us through this voodoo, and also to thank the two gentlemen here who have joined us from live. But I would also want to pose a question, but this is yet for another forum, possibly in Africa. And it's a challenge which I was saying to Neri, that the Africa Forum in Africa. But the question would like to challenge ourselves, because you two guys, you constantly talk about native. I don't know what this native is all about, because it's kind of another terminology which is still confusing even to myself, because I was looking at the National Gallery plans recently, and it mentions about the native changing rooms. I felt very disturbed about the original plans, but it wasn't then when they made those plans. But I now hear the word native from you and from Tadesse and from all of you talking about native, but I think this is yet to another forum in the African continent, whether it's in Addis, it's in Harare, it's in Lagos, it's in Kampala or Khartoum, but it's up to us now to be able to look into the future and interrogate this word native, because it's very harsh. It's a term which was coined to us as natives, but we're no longer natives. I would like to thank the organizer and thank you as audience for gracing this occasion.